You can pin the video so it records it correctly. Good. So welcome everyone, and especially our new folks who haven't joined the ride yet. We've been following a thread. We've been exploring a particular facet of human experience, is it? And each of these meetings have been building upon each other. And so this month and next month, if you, for those who will continue on the ride, we're approaching things with a little bit more of a broad stroke. And then in our kind of official Soulship cycles, we go into more depth, detail, experientially. And what we've been exploring in slightly more broad strokes this month is a particular dimension of experience that in the Kaduma path, we use a term to refer to it. The term we use is the journey of wholeness. And we use a model of these 5 journeys to outline certain landmarks of not just the inner journey or the spiritual journey, but really the journey of life, human journey, more generally. The journey of contraction, which is the first journey, is more the conventional or typical experience of the journey of life. And for many people, that's the sum of it, which has to do mostly with the construction of the typical psychodynamic structures and narratives and storylines, accumulation of historical images, self-images and identities that is a healthy achievement for a developing human being and necessary. We call that the journey of contraction, not because we view that as a problem or something to get rid of. Simply contraction points to the way that mode of experiencing our symptoms experience. And in many cases, we don't recognize the contracted, you could say, qualities of conventional experience until we have a moment of expansion, which is the second journey. When we have a moment of opening beyond those internalized and deeply, often unconsciously held identity structures. We have a moment of expansion beyond its contours and its confining, limited boundaries. And in contrast, we recognize, really a contracted, sort of limited way to have been orienting to myself, to others, to the world, to reality. It's like we have a moment. The classical traditions mostly describe this process. Waking up to a more limitless, boundless, spacious mode of being that doesn't operate according to the laws of conventional experience. That movement into expansion oftentimes is big awakening. And it puts into perspective what we really are, what reality really is. The third journey in this path, in this model, the journey of wholeness, and that's where we've been kind of dancing and playing this month and of late in the Soulship. The journey of wholeness has to do more with the digestion and integration of that tension arc between contraction and expansion that oftentimes characterizes spiritual journey. We tend to find ourselves moving back and forth from a more confined, contracted mode. And if we are engaging some kind of a path or teaching, or even if it's by grace, for some people it's a hike in nature, we contact that place in perception, in our possibilities of perception that is not, you could say, confined in the same way. We feel ourselves open. What we are, even in that open state, is kind of both. It's an open experience, but it's an open question, and it's not even a question that needs to be answered in that experience, because it just is clear. And when we come back from retreat or come back from our hike, or the circumstances in our relationship are not quite right, or we go home for the holidays, or whatever it may be, we find ourselves again tied up in a knot of one kind or another. And so we play with that dynamic, that what I call the tension arc, this movement between our contracted experience and our expanded experience. And I think it's common on spiritual paths to idealize more the expanded states. That's what we seek, that's what we want. That is the natural aspiration of the human heart, soul, body, to know itself, to be freed from its limitations. And it can become a kind of fetish for some. That is to say, we want to be free of our contraction so much that we can get into a cycle where we're, judging or dismissing our contracted experience and doing all kinds of things to not experience that contraction in order to find some enlightenment, spaciousness of being. And we don't see that as a problem or anything to, either. It was just note that seems to be what happens. I know for me that was how it was for a very long time. That was like I devoted my life to maintaining as long as possible states of expansion. I organized my life around that. How many hours a day did I need to meditate? What kind of company would I keep? What kind of activities would I engage? What activities would I not engage? What kind of people would I not be around? What situations would I avoid? Was I on schedule with my meditations? Was I doing all the things that I had kind of learned that I needed to do in order to kind of stay high all the time? God high. To stay in that space of, gosh, I can breathe into my neighbors. I can feel my body, soul as part of the environment and totally seamlessly and inseparable. Because that was where the bliss was. That was where the freedom was. Right? Could I feel the energetics, imprints move through me without sticking? Or was they hooking into some place in my, psycho-spiritual constellation of organized structures? So that kind of way of orienting is, I think, natural course of things, and makes sense. The journey of wholeness, I'm not going to get into great detail here. We will later on in this coming Soulship cycle. But the journey of wholeness, you could say, represents an integration of contraction and expansion, in the sense that it recognizes, not intellectually or mentally, but experientially. So it recognizes that there is a truth to our being in its movement into and toward life, with all of its contracted details, with all of the ways that we can engage life as human beings, with all of the ways that can be so painful and difficult and challenging and triggering and keep us, what feels like, removed from God or expansion or light or love in its vastness. The perspective of the journey of wholeness, of this kind of presence body as it develops, doesn't see the material of life as something that is at odds with truth, the truth and the alignment with being, with that expansion, with that possibility of expansion. It sees it rather as an expression, as a manifestation of the vastness, the vast space itself, coming into being, into the particulars, in all of their appearances and all of their ways of making us feel like shit. At least, at least that's how it feels, if we're pretending to be a victim in that moment. A victim to the life situation. So another way that we kind of talk about this in Kaduma is the journey of waking up and the journey of waking down. That comes from the Zohar, a classical text of Jewish mysticism. And Itaruta dil Ila and Itaruta dil Tata is Aramaic. Awakening from above, awakening from below. And the awakening from above, or itaruta til eila, the waking up, has to do with waking up into the expanded modes of perception. That has to do really with the classical vertical journey of awakening. What is it that we are? What is reality? The direct, immediate perception of how things are in all of its various ways that can appear. Whether it's dense black space like it brings a stillness and a imperturbable peace without a ripple in its ocean of black water, or it's the crisp, clear light of clean, clear perception, or it's various kinds of light, different qualities of being. All of that has to do with a certain, what we call the verticality, and it correlates with the vertical channel of the true life. And so we've worked with that a great deal in the Kaduma experientially. So we, the journey of wholeness has to do with waking down. Waking down is the journey of integrating that kind of perception, our awakenness, bringing what we know, what we have realized to be true, through and through life in its horizontal dimension. That is to say, what we do as human beings. Mostly what we do as human beings is we act. We do something. We function in one way or another. We get up in the morning, we do things. We make breakfast. We go to work or go to school, or if we're lucky, we could just go play golf all day, but it's usually people are doing something. I mean, people do things with their time. Even if they're just sitting there reading, they're doing something, there's some action occurring. And part of the broader framework of doing includes the human relating that we engage in as human beings. We relate with each other. All human beings have to relate. Even if we isolate ourselves in a cave to meditate, we're still relating with the world by not relating with the world. But it's impossible to escape the fact that every human being has related directly at some point, even if it was at birth. Somebody had to feed the baby, they say. So anytime, sometimes I meet people and we talk about these things, and I say something like that, and they say, no, it's not true. I have never related about. I don't relate. I say, really? You don't relate? So, as a baby, did you ever experience relating? No, my mother didn't breastfeed me. But she fed you? No, she didn't even feed me. We had a caretaker feed me with a bottle. Okay. So you're in a relationship with the caretaker. Relationship. Somebody had to put that in there. So there's no way around it. We're all impacted by relationship, and of course, there's a whole field of psychology that has articulated in detail how relationship has served as the primary vehicle in the formation of self-identity. It's object relations theory. And last week, we began to unpack a particular facet of that, not really object relations theory, but more having to do with neurobiology. neuroscience, which, as I mentioned last week, it's not a legitimate spiritual teaching unless you mention neuroscience now in every talk. But I actually do think that there is a great deal of wisdom and that science offers us, because many spiritual teachings have recognized, and for some it's the central organizing principle of their path, that the nervous system is a kind of external expression, if you will, of the soul consciousness. The health of the nervous system has a direct correlation with the soul. In our teaching, we have an understanding of different subtle bodies. So we call it the presence body, and there's different bodies. And the nervous system is like a biological expression of that, like the outside. The inside and the outside, they're inseparable, really. So there's the knowledge of neuroscience. I mean, I sort of make fun of it, just because I like to make fun of anything that's a fad. That's how I'm in relationship with it. And at the same time, I think it's helpful knowledge. And last time we talked about more of the limbic brain and the mutual limbic regulation, and how human beings, we regulate each other, right? Unconsciously. You just walk into a room and the limbic brains are communicating with each other, we're regulating each other's nervous systems, right? It's like, what's the person's vibe like? Right? It's like we have a sense of people, and our nervous system can get agitated just being in the room with somebody, even without even interacting, just because their nervous system is maybe activated, or if they're in a state of presence affected by that. The nervous system is affected, so it's all connected. And so last week we looked at relating in early life in terms of its impact on the nervous system. And the importance of understanding the way the imprints, you could say, let's put it this way, how the imprints on our individual nervous system have occurred in our life, starting from that young impressionable age, when our pre-verbal, our consciousness is not even yet formed or structured in a fully coherent or developed way, yet our perception is awake, alive. We're impressionable. And so the first imprints of relationship of what the limbic regulation was like in that field has, in this model, affected and impacted the way we relate as adults with each other. That's sort of major insight of Western psychology, developmental psychology. So, we looked at that last week. Now, this week I wanted to open up, I wanted to continue this thread by opening it up a little bit more into, maybe you could say, a more essential or spiritual dimension of this dynamic that's at play in terms of relating. And this principle that we're just going to kind of touch upon in a broad way today, and then loop back around later on, is, in my experience, the core interface between waking up and waking down, between the vertical and the horizontal journeys. It's like, where do those two meet? There's like a certain meeting place experientially, where this kind of opening in the consciousness and the soul, this quality of being, is a portal or doorway, the nexus, if you will, to both the opening up of the journeys into expansion and all the vertical dimensions and all their possibilities, subtleties. And also, it's the lens through which the being starts coming into being as a human, functional, relational organism, consciousness, where being and becoming meet. This dimension of experience, I refer to using the Hebrew term pinima, which literally means inside, pinima. But interestingly, like many Hebrew words, it has a double meaning. So it also comes from the same word that means a face, like panim, face. So this is an interesting word in that it means inner and also points to outer at the same time. Makes sense then that this would be the interface between, waking up and waking down, or between the vertical and the horizontal, between being and its purity, in its sort of aligned truth, objective nature on the one hand, and the particularization of being into a human individual as a personal expression of the totality. Human being in its mystery, in its essential mystery, is this interface between being and becoming. We are, I don't know if we're unique in this sense. I don't know enough about the consciousness of other animals or beings, but certainly the human being has a remarkable capacity to be both and simultaneously manifested in its fullness and all of its particulars and all of our infinite variety of ways that we interface with the world, with life on the one hand, and at the same time we can be connected to unspeakable subtleties of vastness of being, of totality that are not particularized, individualized. We have this gift as the nature of our soul to be both here and there, to be in the world or not of it, and the way Sufis talk about. So this panima quality speaks to that. And it relates to this very early time in our life that we explored last week. The infant in the first, year or two of life, for sure, is so connected to this. We're so connected to that interface of being and becoming. And I think it's one reason why we're so enamored and, so affected by the presence of an infant. It's like why it impacts the conscious, why it impacts our consciousness so much. If we're awake to it, if we're really in touch with ourselves in the presence of a newborn, it's an amazing kind of presence. It's like they're both vast and dense. Like they're a very particular dense sort of being, and at the same time there's this kind of amazing openness and vastness. It's like they're right at that juncture, right at this place, this Panima place. That Panima is found in the Hebrew Bible, in the Torah, and one verse where it appears that I like, which I think speaks to it, is Kvoda bat melech Panima, that the glory or the honor, the beauty of the princess is Panima. So you can translate that the beauty or the glory of the princess is on the inside. Or if you want to read Panima from the sense of Panim, you could say the beauty or the glory of the princess is on the outside. Is it the inside or the outside? You see, it's pointing to a mystical truth where it's both. That it's this quality of being that is the preciousness and the beauty of the princess. And this quality of being, I think a good word in my experience of this quality, that captures this very delicate kind of interface, is a certain kind of vulnerability, a precious, delicate, sensitive vulnerability of being, so vulnerable, like liquid glass, like crystalline, like a crystalline lens that's transparent, but yet still there and so sensitive, so vulnerable. When somebody is inhabiting that place in themselves, when they are like a newborn, in a sense, newborns are totally vulnerable. They're the essence of vulnerability. Their presence is so pristine, so unmarked. It's a beautiful thing. The beauty of the princess is Panima. This quality is essence of beauty, I could say. And it is what connects us, both on the vertical path of waking up and also on the horizontal path of waking down. It is like the core orienting posture deep in our soul. And this is a very deeply wounded place for many of us. To abide in that vulnerability, for many of us, is very painful, very difficult, and almost can feel impossible, especially in certain relational situations where the wounds of our personal history have accumulated and entrenched themselves deep in our psychobiology. So, for some people, the journey of waking up, the vertical journey, being vulnerable to God, is easy or easier. Whereas being vulnerable in the human realm is very, very difficult. It can feel impossible. Feel a huge threat and a danger, a risk that is not worth taking. Some people it's the opposite. Some people, they find themselves interacting more fluidly in the horizontal plane, but you invite them into a deeper space of silence in themselves. If you invite them to open up to the objective truth of reality, that feels like intolerable kind of thing. So people are very different in this way. Some people both feel like incredibly painful and inaccessible. And I've never met anyone for whom vulnerability is just a naturally occurring event, an experience in their life, regardless of the situation. And I would imagine that would be incredibly boring to be a human being like that. So it's not like we're seeking that, right? That's not like the point. It's like, oh, no, now I have to be vulnerable everywhere. He said, vulnerability is a thing, so now I have to be vulnerable. That's not the point. What is it's just, you know, this is one possibility of experience, not better or worse. So as is obvious, I think there's a lot to this question of vulnerability and many layers to unpack and explore and experience, both on the vertical plane and the horizontal plane. And I think actually there could be a whole spiritual teaching. I mean, like a whole path, like just create a new path, you know, just about this. Like if we could work just on the question of vulnerability and work through all of the accumulated narratives and stories and energetic and societal impressions on our consciousness around this experience, that could be a lifetime work right there. You know? And in some sense, much of teaching, much of the path comes down to this kind of a thing. But what I appreciate is not just the beauty of that, but also the challenge of that. How exquisitely beautiful is it? How painful it is, actually, for many of us to be in this delicate space, not just in our heart, but our soul, like to have our soul exposed and all the fears that come up around that. How precious is that is the case? Perhaps universally for all human beings in one way or another. That is actually what relationship as a spiritual path reveals. It provides us with an opportunity to practice, to explore, to see, well, what's it like to be present and vulnerable in this relationship, even though I'm afraid or there are these wounds, or noticing what comes up in that context and then applying our methods and our tools to work with that material. All of that work develops this journey of wholeness and the possibilities of the journey of wholeness, which has to do with the formation of the, you could say, the true human being, the full human being, the complete human being, where the Talmud says, Toho Kavara, the inside is like the outside. That's how the Talmud describes the true human being. The inside is like the outside. You see, remember Panima? The inside is like the outside. Where what we are in our depths, in our essential nature, and who we are as we express ourselves in our life. It's like how we are in the world is who we are. It's not, there's no gap. You see? What that exposes is the truth that we don't have to be in a particular state of realization to be who we are in a seamless way. We can be true to the pain that we're experiencing, to the contraction that we're experiencing. That can be our expression. And if that is a truthful expression of what we are and what our experience is, then that is toho kavara. That is the inside is like the outside. We are embodying the truth of wholeness simply by being true to our experience, whatever it may be, which frees us from that tension arc between contraction and expansion that then can become a whole limited constellation of orientation in and of itself. No, I am the vastness of being, and I am a human individual with a history and these kinds of issues that I'm working with, and this is what comes up for me in this relationship, in this situation, and this is how I experience it. And there's a lot that I don't know, but there's something that feels really whole about being true to that. See? And the consciousness fills out, it begins to settle and round out and kind of become more real. There's a sense of that, like, this is just what it is, like, and that's enough, like, that's more than enough. Because it feels like me. Feels like me with all of it. All of it. See? So wholeness is really the inclusion of all of it in the palpable manifestation of presence. So let's check it out for a bit, explore it. We'll have time to discuss, you know, there are questions or comments. We'll have time after the exercise to discuss. So, but I'd like to just throw everyone in with all of the questions, just to see experientially what occurs, because really the teaching is more in what's happening for you in your experience, what presence is kind of manifesting here for you personally. That's the teacher here. So let's do a practice. This practice is, I call it the chavruta practice, so our rabbinical students will appreciate this. Or they may not appreciate it, actually, depending on if this is your cup of tea. Chavruta is also comes from the Jewish tradition. It's the classic practice, actually. The standard contemplative practice in rabbinic academies is to study with a study partner. It's called a chavruta. So you study the Torah with a partner. There's a whole method of how you do that. It's a dialectical method of study. There's an engagement with each other as you unpack the text, you know, seeking the truth of the meaning of the text. So it's a dynamic engagement. It's not just like, you know, you sit there and you space out, the other person's like reading. No, you're present with the other and with the subject of your investigation. In Kajuma, we apply this principle to the subject of our investigation, which we shift in Kajuma from the text to the person. So we're explorers of consciousness, being, of our experience, of our human nature. That's what we're exploring here. So with a chavruta, with a partner, we explore that in a kind of dynamic way, called the chavruta practice. So in this practice, you get together with a partner, and the practice starts at the beginning with 2 minutes of just sitting silently with your partner, and you're really orienting your, what we call the 3 postures in this teaching. So you're orienting yourself to the practice. And that involves really sensing into your body, your arms, your legs, your being. And because you're with another and we're beginning to play with relationship, about 70% of your attention and your presence is concentrating itself in your body. And about 30% is like relating energetically with other in a receptive way. You're not like feeling into their chakras and all that, none of that. Okay, you're just present with yourself and you're present with other. You're open. Open. Okay. And there's another element to practice I'll introduce in a second. So you're orienting for about 2 minutes, and you could gaze at each other's eyes for those 2 minutes. But again, you're not like hyper-focusing your energy into the other person. That will feel invasive. Okay, and it's not the point. Even though you're gazing, you're mostly present with yourself and just open. Make sense? That's that practice. After 2 minutes, you begin to explore together more from the embodied experience, on the level of embodied experience. You're exploring your shared embodied experience of the space, the presence in the relational field, in the field that is created with the 2 of your presences sitting together. When you sit with another person, there's you, there's the other, and then if we're present and we're open, we may notice that there's also a kind of like particular feel that's unique to the 2 of you. It would feel different than if you were sitting with somebody else. Yes? I'm calling it relational field. And it's the shared presence that's generated through these 2 individual presences that are coming together. So there's you, there's the other, each with your own presence body, and then there's almost like a third presence that is now beginning to form. It's already beginning to form when you sit down and you practice the 2 minutes together. It's starting like a newborn. Now, for those of you who know each other well or have had a history together, that's already likely formed already. Like if you have a relationship with someone, a friendship or an intimate relationship or someone you've known over time, it's like you meet them and then you can feel that presence is already there. It's like you pick up where you left off. Yeah, and then it can develop over time and deepen and grow, and it can become a whole life into itself, right? So we just want, in this context, it doesn't matter who you're with. You can be with someone you don't know at all, and then that becomes an interesting exploration in terms of, what is this like to be here with you, and what does the field feel like? And then you explore it together as a kind of dynamic exploration between the 2. You see, you're unpacking the embodied experience of the presence. Does that make sense? So you can talk to each other and engage. It's an engaged practice, and do it in a spirit of exploring. If you find yourself getting lost in mental activity and, then just come back just take a minute to sense into your body again and approach it, and you might be exploring it very slowly at first, you're really just feeling into it, getting a sense of it. Oh, what do you experience I experienced this in your presence, and then you just see where it leads, okay? So do that, so 2 minutes, and then we'll do that dialectic, Chavrita practice, for 15 minutes. Explore that together, okay? And then when the 15 minutes are up, you time yourselves. Have let's do a 5-minute discussion between the two of you around, it's like now you're reflecting back on the experience of the practice, the Chavrita practice, and you're sort of exploring what was the level of vulnerability like in the field between the two of you. So each of you might have input about that. Like, one of you might notice that you were feeling kind of closed and not really open to it. And maybe you maybe you notice that you were surprised that you felt really open and vulnerable and real. So you just check in and see, what was it like for you? What was the level or degree of vulnerability? If there wasn't, if you felt like it was limited, how is it limited? Why was it limited? What do you understand about that? Was it something about the other person? Maybe you didn't trust them, or maybe that's just usual for you. You see what you understand about it. And if you were aware that there was a lot of vulnerability, then what was that like? What does that feel like? What's the experiential contours of that experience of being vulnerable with another in this relational exploration, they say. That make sense? So we'll come back in about altogether, and we'll give a few minutes at the end just so people can use the restroom, so let's come back by like 8:30, okay? Now, the folks on the Zoom, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 of you. So what you guys can do, are you trying to say something? No? No, okay. So what you guys can do is do a quadrileptic inquiry. Okay, so I'm going to give you a question, and then what you do is you just go around, and each person, this is the beginning part of it. Each of you go around and just respond to the question. Okay, so the question is, tell me something that limits your vulnerability. Okay, tell me something that limits your vulnerability. So each of you just go around and you answer that question, whatever comes up spontaneously for you. Okay? So Penelope will say something, and then Batya will say something, and then Chaim, you can answer that, and then Matt. Okay? And then you just keep going around in a circle like that for, let's say 5 minutes. Okay? And then for the 5 minutes after that, you switch directions, whichever way you're looping around, you go the other direction, and you answer the question, tell me a way you experience vulnerability. Tell me a way you experience vulnerability, okay? And 5 minutes that, and then after that exercise together, then you have a group exploration of the presence of the group, okay? What's it like after you do those exercises together, and just what do you notice in the non-local field of cyber soulship? Okay, and then we'll come back a little further.